My name is Andy Z. I'm the spokesperson for Revolution Books. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Rise up and get into the streets and unite with people everywhere to build up the resistance in every way that you can. And don't stop. Don't conciliate. Don't accommodate. And don't collaborate. That is the title of an article that we posted on revcom.us this week. It's also an important directive, not just for revolutionaries, but for everyone. This is a time that's going to demand a lot of courage and a lot of delving into what is the actual situation. It's going to be a time when we have to cast away illusions about the society we live in and what is to come. And we're going to have to prepare right now for a great deal of struggle. What's coming and what is on its way is not pretty. Yet there is potential in this situation to stop it and also to wrest out a different future. Now, we call this emergency forum. It's going to be kind of a, in one sense, we're both going to give informal talks and try to have a discussion with all of you, even as there's a lot of us here tonight on this topic. But first, I want to actually, with your permission, take a few minutes to talk about where you are and why that matters. As I said, I am the spokesperson for Revolution Books. I want you all, in thinking about what drove you here tonight, this afternoon, looking at this Trump presidency, about what this story is and why it matters. And for those of you who haven't been here before, this is for you, but it's even just as much for those of you who are on the staff of Revolution Books and who've been supporters of the store and patrons of the store. This bookstore is the political and the intellectual and the cultural center of a movement for an actual revolution. It's a bookstore that's about the world and for a radically new world. It's a place where people come from all over the world to get into what is the problem humanity faces and what is the solution. You've heard me say this many, many times. But in looking at the reality of a Trump presidency, the import of a place where people are seriously getting into what it is that we face and what is to be done should stand out in stark relief. This is a place where we engage with a lot of different trends and a lot of philosophy, of art, of politics, over how did we get where we are right now? Why are we standing on the precipice of the destruction of the planet, let alone the evisceration of rights that people have come to see and expect in this country, even as this country marauds around the world, destroying lives and crushing spirits of people from one end of the globe to the other, including right here in the belly of the beast, as was said in the 1960s. We talk about here, is revolution possible? Why is it possible? Why is it necessary? What should it be? How could we win? And what is a new society? And at the core of this engagement is a new synthesis of communism and the leadership of Bob Avakian, which most of all is a scientific approach to probing reality as it actually is, and doing so with wide arms At the heart of this scientific method is a process called solid core with a lot of elasticity on the basis of that solid core. The solid core is that we understand at this store, and we try to impart this to people while talking with people about why it is this system does what it does over and over and over again to people, and what it is that can be done. And yet we do that in a way that's inclusive in terms of talking to people and then struggling over, are we right? Do we have the solutions? What can we learn from the great diversity of human thought and artistic achievement and scientific endeavor? So that's what goes on here, and it matters now more than ever. The stakes are really great. And I have to say to you that the future of this store does still hang in the balance. And that's where you come in. I'm going to talk more about this later. We were about to embark, and we're still going to embark, on a month of fundraising, of sales, of benefits, and that's still going to happen. And celebration. On November 15th, 2 days from now, is the first anniversary of Revolution Books in Harlem. And we're going to kick off that month on December 2nd, Friday night, with a concert by the great Grammy Award-winning pianist and composer and band leader Arturo Faro of the Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra and his quartet. So we'll talk to you more about that and this celebration. But now, this takes place in a different context. This takes place in the context of the beginning of a fascist America that we must stop. And so we're also beginning tonight 65 days of programming on fascism. What is it? What is this Trump presidency? How do we understand fascism? What are the roots of this in America? How do we confront the fact that the huge majority of white people voted for him? What's wrong with white people? Well, at one point we said nothing that a good revolution couldn't cure, and that's true, but we actually have to get into this situation very, very seriously. And over the next month, the next 65 days till what? The inauguration. We are going to have programming here. Sometimes it'll just be a small discussion. 5 or 6 people come in to talk about a topic with Carl Dix or myself or Raymond Latta or other people. We're going to have guest speakers, authors. The cartoonist Ted Rall today wrote me and said, I'll come speak. He wrote a book on Trump a while back. So he'll be here. We're going to have a lot of people into the store over the next month. It's very, very important that people understand what is happening and what is to be done about it. So that's my opening on the role of Revolution Books. Now, I'm going to say a couple words about the theme of the program. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Then Carl's going to talk for a little while. And then I'm going to talk for a little while, we hope, or maybe not. But then we're going to have an open discussion about this, and we're going to try and do this all by 6 or 6:30. So I want to begin with something from the New York Times. It said, several reliable, well-informed sources confirmed the idea that Trump's anti-Muslim rhetoric and anti-immigrant program was not so genuine or violent as it sounded, and that he was merely using this anti-immigrant propaganda as bait to catch the masses of followers and keep them aroused, enthusiastic, and in line for the time when his presidency is off and running and sufficiently powerful to be employed effectively for its political purposes. A sophisticated politician credited Trump with particular political cleverness for laying emphasis and overemphasis on anti-immigrant feelings, saying, you can't expect people to understand or appreciate your finer real aims. You must feed the masses with masses with cruder morsels and ideas than anti-Muslim feeling. It would be politically all wrong to tell them the truth about where you are really leading them. So this article was published, as some of you may have recognized it, on November 21st, 1922. But what it actually said is several reliable, well-informed sources confirmed the idea that Hitler's anti-Semitism was not so genuine or violent as it sounded, and that he was merely using anti-Semitic propaganda as a bait to catch the masses of followers and keep them aroused, enthusiastic, and in line for the time when his organization is perfected and sufficiently powerful to be employed effectively for political purposes. You get the point. There are a lot of people telling you right now, that's just campaigning. Don't worry. Let's get in there and work with him. Wish him success. This is a very, very wrong and dangerous trajectory. Okay, yes, this article was 1922, and it would be 10 years before Hitler was elected to the parliament and then named chancellor in a coalition government. And even then, such articles appeared in the mainstream press. You could say that 24 months is a long time, but between 1932 and 1934, it was a world of change. And then between 1934 and 1939, the horrific consequences began to become apparent, even as many of the mainstream press ignored the reality of what was being done to the Jewish people. So look, this is really, really serious. I have something else here that I wanted to read. Maybe, oh, here it is. I don't know, many of you maybe saw it today. Well, how many know the play by Ionesco, Rhinoceros? Okay, well, maybe some of you saw that Teju Cole wrote a column about this today. And spoiler, no spoiler, I'm not going to tell you about the play. Read the column. And then, hopefully at Revolution Books we have Ionesco and you can buy the book. But the point of the matter is what I was just reading, that the play is people accommodating themselves to a great horror. And I just want to read something from the end of this article. Here. On August 19th, 2015, shortly after midnight, the brothers Stephen and Scott Leader assaulted Guillermo Rodriguez. Rodriguez had been sleeping near a train station in Boston. The Leader brothers beat him with a metal pipe, breaking his nose and bruising his ribs and calling him a wetback. They urinated on him. All these illegals need to be deported, they are said to have declared during the attack. The brothers were fans of the candidate who would go on to win the Republican Party's presidential nomination. Told of the incident at the time, that candidate said, "People who are following me are very passionate. They love this country, and they want this country to be great again." Now these forces are unleashed, and you've not seen but the beginning of it. So, again, this is serious. Hitler, you know, okay, it's not an exact analogy, but it's more exact than you think. A lot of people say, oh, Hitler, he didn't have any coherent, Trump, he has no coherent ideology, he contradicts himself all the time, and they said the same thing about Hitler. But actually, if you read the book, The Nazi Conscience by Claudia Kuntz, which if we don't carry now, we will get back in stock very soon, she makes the point that there actually is a coherent ideology, and in fact, a very strong sense of morality for the Volk, for a section of people who didn't view the gypsies, the Jews, as human beings, and all kinds of other people, including people with disabilities. And you can start seeing Trump in all of this. And this is all very real. But then there's a trajectory that this goes down that created tremendous, tremendous horrors. You know, you hear in the campaign and in these people's words in the streets, they say it's us, meaning Americans, against them, meaning the immigrants, the Muslims, virtually anybody who stands against it, the environmentalists, the elites. But really, when push comes to shove, their program is us without them. That's where it leads. That's why the threats are not just idle threats, if you follow my drift on this. So here's what we're going to do. As I said, the next period, over the next 65 days, we're going to be getting into fascism, its roots, trajectory, lessons from the struggle against it, the implications for wrenching something far better out of this situation, the need and the basis to it, at the same time that we want millions of people to be taking this up and are very heartened by the initial protests, the size, the scope, the militance of them. That has to continue in many different forms. At the same time as that, we are also dead set on building a movement for an actual revolution and getting the relationship between these two things in the right way. And I just want to say to the revolutionaries in the room, it really matters that you unite very broadly with people to fight against this fascist America. No, you should not say what you're for and organize a movement for an actual revolution. You should and you must, and if you don't do that, and I'm going to talk more about this later, then the world will go on. We do not want to go back to the world of November 7th with police killing people at the rate of 3 a day. We do not want to go back to the record-setting deportations of the Obama administration, but we have to grasp the difference between that and what's coming. And there's millions of people who want to stop that. We have to unite with them. That's what this statement is about. This is a statement that we believe everyone in this room could take out to all of their friends. Now, we'd also like you to take out the pamphlet, How We Can Win an Actual Revolution. But if you're not ready to do that or you don't agree with it, okay, take this out right now, and we're going to have to put a stop to this. So I wanted to begin with that, and then move on to have Carl speak, and then I'm going to speak a little bit later on a few points. So once again, welcome to Revolution Books. It's under extreme circumstances, but that's why we have a Revolution Books, where we mean both parts of our name. So join me in welcoming Carl Dix, who writes for Revolution newspaper. He was a founding member of the Revolutionary Communist Party, founder of the Stop Mass Incarceration Network with Dr. Cornel West.
Okay, I want to thank Andy for that introduction. And you are where you need to be this afternoon as a prelude to getting out into the streets or back into the streets, because we have to refuse to accept this fascist America. And look, let's just be real clear. A fascist got elected president. Now, I know that there are people who are saying, well, now wait a minute, Carl. Shouldn't we give him a chance? Shouldn't we see what he's going to do now that he's elected? Or people saying, well, he made nice with Obama in the White House. Doesn't that show that maybe he could change? People saying that are playing you, have been played, and are playing themselves. Because look, Trump has already made clear what he represents. I mean, starting with that ride down the escalator at some point in 2015, probably even in the summer of 2015, when he gets off the escalator and he talks about Mexicans being rapists and criminals. Moves on to talk about banning Muslims from entering the country. Talks about being the law and order president. Brags about sexually assaulting women, demeaning and degrading them, and all of the rest. He was letting you know, this was the basis he rallied forces around, and he was laying out, this is what I stand for, this is what's to come. And then you got to think about those rallies. I mean, and there's the Republican National Convention that they had, which speaker after speaker channeled Germany in the 1930s with their fascist crap. But also just the rallies he held all around the country. I'd look at some of those and I'd say, damn, this reminds me of the stories of the lynchings that some of my older relatives told me when I was a child. About how white people would gather for the festive occasion. They'd bring the whole family. They'd bring a picnic basket. Some of them would even be announced in advance so that everybody knew it was happening and wouldn't miss it. You know, and you look at the violence that happened at it, how protesters got pummeled and physically attacked. This is what the man campaigned on. This is what he was prefiguring, and now it's here. And see, if you question that, let's look at what this means on the ground. Look at it as if you're an immigrant child, a school child, you know. And it already was the case that when you went to school in the morning, you worried about, would your parents be there when you got home? Because the deportations, it ain't like they're going to start with Trump. They were already going on, but he has promised to step them up. And then, even more, you don't even want to go to school because you know that these revved up racists at school are going to want to taunt you with build a wall, chanting this in classrooms, you know, in the lunchroom, in the gym at sporting events. You got students now, high school students, marching through the halls of the school with banners that say Trump, chanting white power. This is what you're going up against. Think about that. Imagine that you're a woman, a Muslim woman, someone who wore the hijab as a sign of your faith. So now you're thinking, can I even go outside? Because it's already the case that women who wear the hijab have been confronted, and I'm not just talking about verbal confrontations. Women have had their hijab snatched off their heads, used to choke them. So you're saying, does this mean I can't go outside, or does this mean I have to stop wearing this hijab, which she sees as a symbol of her faith? This is already happening. Let's say you're a black or brown person. You already know that when you step outside, there's a target on your back. You already know that the police are unleashed to instill this kind of terror. And you've got a president-elect who campaigned on, we need law and order. And you kind of know what that meant. That meant the pigs need to be unleashed to come down on you even harder. Okay. Look, you know that that's what that means. You know that with Giuliani being talked about for some position in the administration, you know, attorney general or some stuff like that, what is that going to mean? A man that presided over the ramping up of police terror. That was his legacy as mayor, and that's what his whole thing is built on. The talk about stop and frisk being reinstituted and spread nationwide, which is really talking about the demonization and criminalization that has already been brought down on black and Latino people, especially the young people, going on steroids, being ramped up. Imagine that you live in a village in Afghanistan or Pakistan, and you've already got concerns about drone strikes, which Obama ramped up. Well, you got a president-elect talking about, I'm going to bomb the shit out of ISIS. And when he says that, he means he's going to bomb the shit out of people in other parts of the world where they've been waging war and having trouble getting things under control. This is all going to be ramped up. This is what the future is going to bring down. You say you're a female. It already was a question of concern to you going out, especially going out at night, going out alone, because you know about the horrific numbers of women who are subject to rape and sexual assault. Well, you just got a guy elected president who bragged about sexually assaulting women and who talked about that as, oh, that's just locker room talk. Come on, let's not be politically correct. What is going to be unleashed by this kind of shit? What is that going to mean? And look, I'm not here just talking about something that's going to happen in the future, because it has already begun to happen. Some of the things I talked about in high schools, happening in high schools and middle schools, some of them happened a while ago, but in the less than a week since Trump's election, there have been many more such reported things. And a lot of them have been caught on video. So it isn't even just, oh, you're making this stuff up. There it is. There are the white students marching down the hallway with the banner that says Trump, chanting white power. That ain't made up. Neither is the talk about building the wall. This stuff is actually happening. Trump supporters in their pickup trucks in Massachusetts, driving into Wellesley College, sorry, I got that wrong, with their Trump banners threatening students, especially threatening female students, because they're getting what's actually being unleashed here. Saying what they'll be able to do to them when their man gets into the White House. This is already happening, as well as the attacks on women wearing the hijab. And it's not like this just started, but it is being ramped up. This is what this means. This is what this comes down to. And it really does pose a challenge of refusing to accept this. And Andy already mentioned that there are people in the streets all across the country in large numbers, and that's good, but it has to go beyond that. It has to get bigger. It has to be determined. People have to really be determined not to accept this, because it is ugly. It is not something that, oh, well, we've been through worse, so we can ride this out. No, we have to refuse to accept this. We cannot let this go down. Now, let me talk about this. There's a lot of talk about, hey, why did this happen? Is it because there wasn't enough black turnout? We didn't get enough black people to come out and vote for Clinton? Or was it because of the people that voted for the third party? Is that why it happened? Well, look, there is a big flashing light about this. And it tells us something very important. Because look, Trump got elected because a whole shitload of white people voted for him. You know, because people talking about, well, there's this section and that section. One thing that you find as you go through the sections is that on just about every score, white people white people who voted broke for Trump. Some broke way for Trump. Some barely broke for Trump. But that's how it basically came down. And that needs to be looked at squarely. That's what came down. That's what happened. Not this other. This is a question to get into. And look, on one end, not surprising. This is America. It was conceived in genocide against the native inhabitants, dragging people from Africa in slave chains. And white supremacy has been built into its framework and fabric. The exact forms that white supremacy took have changed over the centuries, but it has always been there. So large numbers of white people being unleashed behind a campaign with the slogan, "Make America Great Again," which then poses, when did you think America was great? Because it never was. But if you're looking for going back to a way that America was, one of the big themes of that is going to be when white supremacy was less subjected to challenges. So the fact that a number of white people were drawn to that and took that up, not surprising. But this is not something that is written in stone. It is not in the DNA of white people to take that stand. See, and this is not me trying to shine this on. This is reality. I mean, one thing we can look at these demonstrations, and you've got a whole lot of young white people in the street saying, we reject this asshole, and a lot of them are even saying, we reject this fascist asshole, although not so clear they know exactly what fascism is. That's something that's got to be worked on. But there's a lot of young white people in the streets saying, we don't want this. Not nearly enough, but there's a lot, and that's a start and something to be built on. But also, I mean, look, this gray, I come by it honest. I didn't tint it in there. And not only have I been around a while, I've been involved in the movement against the horrors that this system brings down for a while. So I remember some other times. I remember the 1960s, back when I was in the Army, got orders to Vietnam, and trying to figure out what I needed to do. One of the thing that helped me figure out correctly what I needed to do, which was to refuse to go to Vietnam, to refuse to be part of trying to drown the liberation struggle of the Vietnamese people in blood, and to go to jail, because that's what they did to me when I refused. What helped me to do that was the fact that there was a powerful movement of resistance in this country. And I always make a big point of saying, somebody in the Black Panther Party pulled me aside and said, ain't no black man got no good reason to go to Vietnam and kill yellow men for this white supremacist system. And that had a big impact on me, but that was happening in the midst of a very broad, very determined, very powerful movement of resistance. And there were a lot of white people in that movement. You know, when I was out on the West Coast trying to figure out a way to avoid going to jail and going to Vietnam, I hung out with people who were involved in this movement. It was up in the Seattle area. And I remember the nights spent, well, we got high. That was part of what we did. But we also would listen to music, we'd talk, and there was just a feeling in the air of, we're all outlaws in the eyes of America. It was in the culture, it was in the music, you know, and we just kick back, listen to the music, talk about how we were going to move the struggle forward. And there was this widespread sense among a lot of people of different nationalities, including a whole lot of white people, that they weren't with this system, and in fact were part of fighting against it, and many of them wanted to bring it down. So we need to bring forward a better breakdown among the people, and especially bring a lot of white people over to get into this resistance. Because you can't take an approach of, well, maybe it won't be so bad for me, so then that means it's okay. Because that's wrong on two counts. The first and most important count that it's wrong on is that this is about humanity and what it means for humanity. And you can't say, I don't see it hitting me right now, so let's roll with it, because you're condemning humanity to continue suffering this. And then we got to take to heart something from the 1930s from Pastor Niemöller, who talked about when they came for the communists, I said nothing because I wasn't a communist. And he worked through the groupings of people, socialist, trade unions, Jewish people, lesbian, gay people, others who were targeted by the fascist regime of that time. And that calculation of, hey, it's not hitting me right now, can be one that sets you up to be hit farther down the line. We have to stand up. We have to refuse to accept the fascist onslaught that is in the air, coming down, being unleashed right now. We have to stand up, we have to fight that. And look, we in the Revolutionary Communist Party are going to be in the midst of that fight. We're going to be standing together with everyone else who wants to take this shit on and fight to stop it. And we're going to be bringing forward what humanity needs in the course of that fight. And what humanity needs is an actual revolution, one that overthrows this imperialist system, gets rid of it, and brings into being a totally different and far better way for people to live. So thank you, sisters and brothers.
Okay. I mentioned fundraising. One of the things we're raising money for, and that when Arturo Farrell is going to be here, it's going to be the inauguration of our new performance space. Not that I'm ready to perform today, but it will be a big stage where we could put a table on it so that for those times when we come to speak here with lots of books, we can actually lay them out on the table. So you're going to have to forgive me, including that there's a microphone here. There's several things that I want to comment on. I want to thank Carl for that, and for especially for this is very visceral. This is very real. And it's not going to do any good. We should not lose our sense of humor, but it's not going to do any good to make a joke out of this. Okay? I see in the audience today a lot of people I don't know, but I also see some people in the audience who I stood with and worked very hard with at the beginning days of the Bush regime. And I want to say I'm really glad to see you here. Because once again, we have to stand against a fascist regime. And we were talking then about Christian fascists, which is what the Bush regime concentrated, along with a bunch of neocons, with the Christian fascists being the most dynamic factor. Here it's not neocons, it's this Trump xenophobia, this Trump program in unity with the Christian fascists. Make no mistake of who Mr. or Vice President Pence is. But one thing you can learn about this is that in that terminology which we and others used at the turn of the 21st century, Christian fascists, the dominant factor was the fascism. And that's the hypocrisy of those people. Trump stands against, and his whole life is an embodiment of everything that they're opposed to, except that bottom line of a fascist approach and a racist, white supremacist, misogynist approach, which is at the root, the patriarchy is at the root of that religious fundamentalism. So I just wanted to make that point, because this is he's managed to cohere. Yes, they're going to fight like rats, but they're also cohered around a very serious program. And it wasn't that different with Hitler. Listen, that Donald Trump has been accepted as a legitimate heir to the leadership of this country should tell you and tell all of us about the extreme nature of the crisis that the rulers of this country face, that they would now coalesce around the Trump presidency and attempt to both ideologically drug people as well as to actually physically drag people into supporting for this. Give it a chance. Support. Yes, there's people in the ruling class who have been fighting against this in a certain framework, including that they've been threatened. And you're going to see them come on board, and you're already seeing the march on board, and you're already seeing the march on board of entertainers and all kinds of other people. That's why this flyer says, don't conciliate, don't accommodate, because that is the road to collaboration, and it's not a fucking pretty road. So I want to say that. Listen to what Obama said. Obama spoke this is going to be something quite close. This will be on RevCom in the morning. Obama spoke a profound truth when he said he and Trump were members of the same team and running a relay race. And the election was an intramural scrimmage to see who could best represent that team. But what is that relay race? A race for empire and world domination driven by the laws of this system, capitalism, imperialism. And what is that team? A team of empire and world domination through military might. A team of the new Jim Crow of mass incarceration, police murder, and genocidal persecution of black and brown people. A team of the subjugation of women. I just have to say something now. Fuck! I said I wouldn't say this. I know this. I know I said this on the phone, but fuck Dave Chappelle and making a joke out of grabbing the genitals of women just because the boss of the hotel says so. Okay. So I went back on what I said, okay. But because it makes me very angry. This isn't fucking funny, okay? This is a team of hounding and deporting immigrants and breaking up their families, a team of destroying the environment. I was talking to Travis Morales and Riley Ruiz of the Revolution Club yesterday on the phone. They're at Standing Rock, and it's cold, and they have no money, and please donate some money so we can keep them there. And I was saying, you know, should we come back? I said, no, you got to stay there. This could be the fucking front line of this thing. Oh, we've got some TV cameras. I have to watch my language. This is the front line of a struggle. He's appointed an energy transition person, an EPA transition person who is a climate denier as well as a lobbyist for the oil industry. The Canadian Premier has called him and said, let's go back on this Keystone pipeline. Let's greenlight it. And you think he even knows what Indian rights are? Let alone is there any intention of doing anything but overthrowing this? So when, on the 15th, people have been called upon to struggle in every city and stand with the people of Standing Rock. You should be out there then. And we have to figure out how more and more people can get out to Standing Rock. Okay. So this is what Obama said about this relay team. What other team could he mean? And why should we hope, as Obama told us to, that Trump's much more openly vicious and brutal squad of thugs should succeed in maintaining that team's domination? Is this our team? And most important, what are we going to do about it? Look, America was never great. And we have to act on that. We need to stop this fascist offensive, and we need to, from our perspective, overthrow this system and bring about something far better. And we have that far better. For those of you who haven't seen it, there's a Constitution for a New Socialist Republic in North America that's written by Bob Avakian. I really recommend that you get a copy and read it. And while you're at it, go get a copy of the U.S. Constitution and read that and see what the difference is of one that protects property rights and slavery and one that leads to the emancipation of humanity. But look, so I went and said this, America's never great. But let's also look at this, about who the founders of this country were. This is something that needs to be returned to, because you're already hearing from both the liberal media as well as the lunatic media about the great traditions of America, the passing the baton, the peaceful transition. Look, the founders of America, Washington, Hamilton, oh my God, this play. Washington, Hamilton, Jefferson, and the rest who signed the Constitution, they participated in a massive crime against humanity, the reinforcement and strengthening of the enslavement, torture, rape of millions of human beings, and the violent suppression of all who dared to rise up. And this crime stretched over 4 generations. The wealth that they plundered from the enslaved, grown on the lands the founders so bloodily stole from the Native American Indians whom they slaughtered, formed the foundation of their democracy and the basis for their greatness. That is the domination of the world. Trump is a fitting heir to this, and they have accepted him. The question is, will we? Okay, so as I said before, there's a cohering ideology to fascism, even as it has lots of internal contradictions to it. It's a form of rule for the ruling class that discards many of the bourgeois democratic rights that people are accustomed to, which is generally the preferred form through which capitalist classes like to rule, and including the role of elections, where they basically pre-select the questions that will be up for consideration, the terms of the debate, and they get the people to make a choice between which one of the elites they're going to put their rubber stamp on. And then when each of these elites screws the masses in different ways, they say, well, what are you going to do? People voted for him. You've got to accept the result. So people are getting played and played again in a game of three-card Monte without ever actually being able to see beneath the surface and that this system isn't in their interest. That's why Bob Avakian, as I said, who's developed the new synthesis of communism and is the leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party, has said that in a world marked by profound class divisions and social inequality, to talk about democracy without talking about the class nature of that democracy and which class it serves is meaningless and worse. And I'll just editorialize. We're going into the worse. So long as society is divided into classes, there can be no democracy for all. One class or another will rule, and it will uphold and promote that kind of democracy which serves its interests and goals. The question is which class will rule and whether its rule and its system of democracy will serve the continuation or the eventual abolition of class divisions and the corresponding relations of exploitation, oppression, and inequality. So this is what's the unity between these two contending factions at the top of our society. Okay? There is a unity. Okay, we'll talk a little bit of dialectical materialism here, which is the science of revolution. There is a unity of opposites between the form of bourgeois democracy and its opposite in this fascist form of rule, which is where they're headed. You can see already in the Trump program the willingness to discard the trappings of bourgeois democracy. You know, how many commentators say, oh, he's willing, well, that's against the Constitution. That's not our precedent. And well, don't bother me with the details. We got work to do here to make America great. Don't think he won't do that. Okay? Just don't think he won't do that. Don't think that, I have to say, here's where you do get played. I was very, moved last night in a not a good way, thinking about the immigrants in this country and all those people who signed up to be dreamers. Guess who has their names and addresses now? And guess what he's going to do with that? This is serious stuff. A bourgeois fascist dictatorship is a qualitatively worse form of rule than a bourgeois democratic dictatorship in terms of what this means for the masses of people broadly and for the entire society and for the vanguard party itself. As Carl was reading before from Pastor Niemöller, first they did come from the communists. And this is going to be a very important thing that all of you are going to have to be thinking about. You say, well, I'm not a communist. I like revolution books. These people seem okay, but I'm not a communist, so if they come after them, okay. No, it's not okay, because that trajectory leads somewhere. Okay? And right now, if you go to revcom.us today, you'll see where in Chicago, in the protest, the police consciously went out and attacked the revolutionary communists. They went and picked these people up who are been out there leading the struggle, actually in the streets of Chicago, to try and stop our youth from fighting each other and instead to fight the system, which is something they don't want to happen because it's very useful for them, thank you, Rudy Giuliani, to make continued use of the fact that you've left these youth, you've left our kids with no choice but to get involved in this vicious drug trade, the one that you've spread from here to El Salvador and creating room for these gangs. And this is where I can go all night on this, I promise I won't. But this is on them. But they put it on us and tell us that this is the best that these people can do when it's their fault, and we've got to get out there and unite people right now against this. But my main point here is it's the communists who are in there trying to lead this fight. And so that it really matters to defend them. So, There is a difference between a bourgeois fascist form of rule and a bourgeois democratic form of rule. But this does not mean that we should fight to bring back that bourgeois democratic form of rule. We should fight every damn measure that they take. We should fight to drive these people out, the fascists and the Trump regime, which is starting soon. But at the same time, we need to be building the fight for a radically new society. And the reason that we don't want to restore the old regime of November 7th is for two reasons. First, because the bourgeois dictatorship in its democratic form is also a horror for the masses of people here and around the world. And second, and tied up with that, is that because you've not broken through the dynamic in which fascism was a solution, it could be a solution again. Okay? To the bourgeoisie, fascism is a matter of taste, but to the masses, it is not. And that's an important distinction. And we want to unite very broadly with everybody of conscience, everybody who wants a different future for humanity, to stand in the fight against what's going down now. At the same time, don't tell us not to talk about communism or revolution. Don't tell us that if we talk about Bob Avakian, it's going to make you nervous. Get over it. Okay? Because there's a question here of, will we unite around what we will unite around, but it is going to matter that there's a force out there that's bringing to people the reality of this system in the midst of this. Even as we have always stayed true, for those of you who I haven't seen in a while, and we were on the same barricade, so to speak, in the early days of the Bush regime, I think we were always consistent in saying what we mean and meaning what we say and being consistent with our principles on that. So let me go back to this, I'm just looking at the clock here, this leaflet. Very quickly here, I do want to reiterate that it says fascism is a serious thing. It feeds on and encourages the threat and the use of violence to build a movement and come to power. And once in power, it essentially eliminates traditional democratic rights. It attacks, jails, and executes its opponents and launches violent mob attacks on minorities. Carl brought out that this is already starting. And in Nazi Germany in the 1930s and the 40s under Hitler, fascism did all these things. They imprisoned millions in concentration camps. They exterminated millions of Jews, Roma people, and other undesirables. And Hitler did almost all of this through established institutions and the rule of law, because this is where this goes. And yes, he could talk graciously when he felt it would serve his interests and fool his opponents. Or lull his opponents is what it actually says. So these are things that we actually have to take very seriously. And we do mean it in the name of humanity. We refuse to accept this fascist America. So I have a number of other things here, but I'm going to try and get to a few other points. Well, actually, Carl did me a favor here, because he read that Pastor Niemöller quote, which is what I was just going to do, and I was going to update it, but I think Carl indicated you can fill in the blanks for yourself and substitute for trade unions, the Muslims, the immigrants, all these other questions. I want to say that we'll do a program around this, but I think it's important for us to get into the roots of this fascism in America, the particular formations, the political formations that come out of America out of World War II, then America after the 60s, the rise of Reagan and Christian fundamentalism as a political force in America, and how that got concentrated in a first very sharp contention during the Clinton administration. One of the things we have on the RevCom website, and which we're going to try to make available here in a printed form, is a piece by Bob Avakian in 98, I believe, called Bob Avakian on the Right-Wing Agenda, The Truth About the Right-Wing Conspiracy and Why Clinton and the Democrats Are No Answer. If you read this, it's like, this is just about 20 years old. It's incredibly prescient to the social formations that were cohering in this country between, on the one hand, these Christian fascists and neocons that were developing, and how the Democrats were taking this up. See, that's one of the things about Clinton, is that he's the one who ended welfare as we know it. As we know, during the campaign, many of us, not just the revolutionary communists, everybody was citing her comments on calling the youth predators, their role in accelerating mass incarceration. Their whole program was very, very right-wing, but it wasn't right-wing enough for the fascists. See? And so they had the contract on America. They went and took the Congress. They put him up for impeachment. I mean, not that there's anything other than disgusting in what he did, but it wasn't that atypical of U.S. presidents, let's just put it that way. So what this was actually about was something else. And this thing has then continued and taken a different form then with George W. Bush. And then you had this Obama, things were really getting out of hand. You had this Obama phenomenon, what Avakian called the Trump card that they played, which was very effective at lulling the movements of resistance, basically decimated them and had everybody cheering and thinking we're, well, maybe not post-racial, but well, look at all the progress we're making, all of which will be, by the way, undone in about 100 days, starting January 21st, because a lot of it had to be done by executive order. So you have to see that there's very intense fighting at the top of the ruling class. And one section of this ruling class will not hesitate and has not hesitated in mobilizing its social base. In other words, these were huge rallies Trump held. And he said that's what he wants to continue to do as president. Let somebody else do the nitpicky work of governing. But he wants to continue this base. This base is enraged, and they have no problem mobilizing it, not only out in the streets, but actually up and down through the military and school boards and all around the country. But the Democrats will never mobilize their social base outside the bounds of electoral politics. They'll never do that because they're afraid of the actual interests of the masses of black and Latino and white people of conscience, not to mention the Native Americans and people from around the world. They will never mobilize that. And this is why they're constantly conciliating to them. So another point Avakian made is if you try to make the Democrats what they are not, you will end up becoming more what they actually are. And that's worth thinking about right now, because we're seeing that process going on right now as people are finding common ground. You find common ground with the fascists, you end up in Vichy. This is where in France, where there were collaborators with the Nazi regime after they invaded. So look, I want to commend this piece on the right-wing conspiracy. Avakian said, our goal is the radical transformation of society and the world to eliminate all oppressive and exploitive relations among the people, and to bring about, as the final goal, a freely associating community of human beings worldwide. And the morals and ideology we uphold and strive to apply are in accordance with that objectives. And this is completely opposed to, he was saying then, the Christian fascists, and at the same time to all forms and expressions of bourgeois rule and bourgeois ideology. But we also recognize, and consistent with our outlook and principles, that there is a need and a basis to build broad unity and struggle against what has been referred to as the politics of poverty, punishment, and patriarchy, and in general against the ways in which the masses of people in the U.S. and throughout the world are subjected to oppression and plunder. So after the program or during the discussion, we do want to talk with everybody here for the ways that we can actually collaborate on this and actually struggle over what is the problem and solution in the course of standing together and fighting against this program. So the other thing I want to commend to you before wrapping up is a pamphlet that you can see I've read a few times. It's called The Coming Civil War and the Polarization and Repolarization for Revolution in the Current Era. There's some very important articles there, including on the history and how to understand the history of Weimar Germany, and you can see a lot of this playing out right now. I don't know who was watching TV this morning and saw Giuliani, that ghoul, talking about, in answer to the question, is he going to, assuming he's Attorney General, would they prosecute Hillary Clinton? And basically what he said, he laid out a bunch of options, and the take-home message is, it's an option. And this is what they do. In other words, it's true that first they'll come for the revolutionaries, but at the same time they'll be constantly going after it within their own ranks, and that's no reason either, without defending anything that she stands for and represents, of not letting them do what they're going to do, because it's part of a whole program to impose a whole different cohering norm. And we can talk more in the discussion today, and we got 65 days where we can talk even more about what are the underlying economic factors that give rise to this. What is, those jobs aren't coming back, okay? No matter what Donald Trump says. This is a factor of capitalism and globalization and mechanization and modernization, these kinds of things. This is the workings of the system. But these are the kinds of things, maybe last week, you were thinking about getting a ticket finally to see Hamilton. This week, you got to start thinking about why the hell are we facing this, and confronting it for real, and then getting down and taking care of business, because this business is what we have to do. So I want to wrap up here and just say that the point of this leaflet is to get it out in huge quantities. You are given complete permission. You don't have to get a copyright. Reproduce this, send this around. Let us know what you think of it. I believe that this or something very similar to this needs to be published as ads in newspapers, and very, very soon. Okay? We have to set a course for people to recognize what is happening. And we have to have this fight over that what is going on is not okay. Okay, we had a first version of a flyer out the night of the election at 5 a.m. before we got this written, and I heard that Bill Moyers read that at Union Theological Seminary. It's not okay, and so then we have to act on it. So I also want to say, in addition to programs at Revolution Books, if any of you teach in high schools or middle schools or in college, if any of you are students in colleges, universities, seminaries, or at your church, mosque, synagogue, teach-ins. We need to have a lot of teach-ins now, okay? People do not know what fascism is. People do not even know a big word like xenophobia. I'm not saying they have to know the word, but they do have to know what it means. They have to understand what's actually underway here. And we have to have a lot of that kind of discourse, and I hope, and my plan is for Revolution Books to be at the center of that. You have a question, about what's going on, call the bookstore and say, I want to come lead a discussion. I want to be part of a discussion. We'll set it up. We need a center of radical and revolutionary discourse. This is it, okay? We're here, that's our purpose, and let's get going now. So I think what Carl I'd like to do is take your questions. We did have a bunch of questions that I'm trying to find, but not with any success. So do you remember what they are that we thought things that we've heard? Well, one is, should we find common ground with him? Should we give him a chance, as Chappelle said last night? I mean, those are questions. Here's another question that comes up, a point that I think Carl spoke to, or maybe I made the point. Well, this is from some black people, well-intentioned, strong people, but they nonetheless said, we've been through slavery, or we've been through Jim Crow, we're going through the new Jim Crow, we'll get through this too. Maybe you white people won't know how to get through this. Well, two things, okay. I can sort of see the second part of that, the point of people needing to cast away illusions and prepare for struggle who haven't had to struggle. But I do want to say that we should get into this question in this discussion, because this is not run-of-the-mill Jim Crow or new Jim Crow. This is serious business. Like I said, in the Claudia Kuntz book, she makes the point that this becomes not us against them, but us without them, the them being people who are already incarcerated and in camps, if you want to put it that way, by the millions, and who are being shot in the streets by the police, and actually shooting each other because of the way this system works. So don't think they can't, as Carl has pointed out for almost 2 decades now, that they can't go from a slow genocide to a fast one under changing conditions. So these are the kinds of things, these are a few of the questions. Do you have another one that we were going to talk about, that we wanted to suggest?
Look, the thing about, oh, Mike, turn it on. I mean, it relates to some of what you've already raised, but he's the president. Don't you have to respect the integrity of the electoral process and the continuing of it? And why are we saying he's illegitimate? He did win the election, didn't he?
Yeah. So that's an important point that we should talk about. And just by the way, it is true that we have to deal with this phenomenon of the white people who did vote for him. But as we say in the leaflet, that he even got more than 5 or 10% of the vote. That's a cause for concern. But the bigger question is, what were the choices? Not just that they were two bad candidates, but that the elections themselves are not the arena through which we, the people, have any real initiative. It's actually an arena into this system through which people are constantly being played, and the fact that they would consider it legitimate. I mean, look, this motherfucker was legitimated over 18 months. There was plenty of time to call out who this guy was, and don't think these people didn't know who he was, and they just, oh, gee, I didn't know this. Because, you see, for a moment when they were all in shock that their polls were wrong, they started speaking some truth, but then pretty much the line came down the next morning, that's not what we're saying, this is what we're saying. What makes America great is the peaceful transition of presidencies, which is really, at this point, must not be a peaceful transition to a fascist form of rule. So with that, so let's get your questions or your comments. Okay, sister back here. A microphone would be good. Is there one?
Yes.
Okay.
On the way.
Sister, yeah, she's got a gold scarf, black. Yeah, there she is.
Hi. I'm just curious why no one's discussing the fact that the Electoral College does not have to vote for Donald Trump, that the people can go out there and demand that they do vote for, it's not a perfect candidate, but Hillary Clinton, and then we can deal with all the issues, not worrying about all the horrible, scary stuff that I have to wake up in the morning and worry about the fact that I have to worry about, for the first time in my life, the color of my skin, or the fact that I'm a woman and expecting more people to think that they can disrespect me, no matter how well I'm educated. So, I mean, I came here from New Jersey because I have 2 kids, and I want to kind of get it known out there that the Electoral College does not in any way have to vote for Trump, and we can at least stop this one way. And why is no one talking about that, and why is no one getting out there? That's what I'm worried about. So that's my question to you. And as an aside, I'm not really into the internet thing. But I mean, if anybody can help me talk about how to use Twitter and Facebook to get out there and get this out there and known. And also, Black Friday's coming, Black Friday weekend. We should use that time to not go shopping and to go out there and do silent protests so that everybody starts listening to what the people want before the Electoral College votes for Trump, because once they vote for Trump, we're kind of screwed. So can somebody help me? Because I've been trying to figure this out, how to get the word out about this.
Okay, well, thank you. What I want to do is, there's a lot of people here, which is great, so I want to get a number of questions out, and then we'll sort through them. But I can't resist. I heard your pitch on Black Friday, but it's my understanding, am I right, Clark, on this one? That this is also Red Friday, where you can shop with a clean conscience at Revolution Books. Okay. That aside, let's, any more, other questions? Okay, Paul.
Comment, question?
No, wait, get the microphone.
The Putin angle, a lot of people, including progressive people, have hated Hillary and the Clintons because of all the things they did in foreign policy in the 90s, and folks might not remember that, but, invading Serbia, invading this country, that country, and the next country, that somehow Trump getting in there, well, that'll be some repression, we'll learn, we'll toughen up fighting him, but at the same time, this is going to be maybe a reduction of tension with the Putin regime.
Okay. Okay, other questions? All right, here. Yeah, you're right.
I'm wondering about the way forward and the idea of building unity and a united front, and working to work with all groups and raise the consciousness of all groups. And I was wondering what people thought of including the animal rights movement, which is also working against the TPP very strongly. I just came from a meeting recently about that, because it does the TPP and all the trade policies, but this fascist agenda basically is out to destroy our whole planet. And animal agriculture is the leading cause of that, according to the science of the United Nations Food and Agricultural Report, the Chicago University study, et cetera, et cetera. I could list a whole bunch. So in terms of uniting with maybe the most oppressed, 6 million of our sister and brother animals have been slaughtered in the last hour that we've been here, a Holocaust. And you said in talking about Hitler's regime, he called people animals. And it's, I think, that animal-human divide that is at the basis, animal being a socially constructed concept, that the closer we are to animals, it's the more we can be debased, and that's anybody who's not white, wealthy, cisgender, homosexual.
Okay.
So that's about a united front. Thank you.
Okay. There is a question back. There's a sister with a white sweater and a green. I got to go light. Yeah, there she is.
I detest public speaking, but I just had to get this out. And this is, I'm going to make it really, really fast. And this is something actually that Facebook friend of mine said, which kind of surprised me. I was for Bernie for the election. I ended up going with Stein because I found out that he hadn't registered as a right, and I will never forgive him for that. But unless
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. He hadn't registered as what?
Apparently, I found out pretty much like the day before voting that apparently Sanders did not register to be written in on election day.
I see. Okay, I just didn't hear you.
Screwed me over, so I ended up going with Stein. Unless someone has mentioned this already. A fellow Stein supporter said, you mentioned that this is about fair elections. I've got one question regarding them, unless it's been brought up. Considering what happened during the primary season, especially right here in New York and right here in Brooklyn, and I volunteered for voter registration, between the primary system, between the primary screw-ups, as well as the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, on general principles, how could anybody possibly say that this was a fair election? I don't get it. Am I missing something here?
Okay. Why don't we take one more, then we can sort through this. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Hello. A couple of questions, possibly related, but taking a page from the World Can't Wait, Drive Out the Bush Regime slogan and movement and the goal. Are we envisioning the movement right now taking shape that would prevent this motherfucker from anywhere being close to levels of power, like one way or the other? I don't care. Electoral college or whatever, they may come up in response to what people create on the ground. Is it a possible aim to not, let him even get close to the levels of power? And the separate question is, this difference between the very first statement that came out right after, which mentioned quite, explicitly what the revolutionaries are about, that our goal is, I believe, liberation of humanity, and we have leadership and we have the strategy. I remember it was taken off, so I couldn't refresh it in my memory. And the second one is a very, focused, broadest United Front type of flyer, where, apart from reference to the RevCon website, there is absolutely nothing that would describe what we want to replace this with him. So was it the correct thing to totally obliterate the reference to revolution from first statement to the second?
Okay, well, Can I start, or you want to speak?
You can start.
Okay. All right, just... just on this last question, a flyer, yes, we put a statement up. It was an important statement to put up at 5 a.m. on basically 45 minutes after this thing, the vote was clear that Trump was going to win, and in fact, as he was, Hillary had conceded, and as he was getting ready to speak. There's nothing wrong with that statement, except that we've had to confront, in the light of day, the enormity of what happened. And, perhaps it's ironic or something, but for some time, people have come to the bookstore or read revcom.us. We've been people saying this could really happen and trying to sound the alarm on this. This is, other people have too. Michael Moore did last spring, I think, or summer. We've been saying this could happen. But I have to say, saying that on Tuesday afternoon and then waking up on Wednesday morning and confronting the full reality of what has just happened are not the same thing. And coming to grips with the enormity of this situation, and then what needs to be done, and then looking at knowing about many youth and other people who come into this bookstore and who we talk to in the revolution clubs around the country, out on the streets, and realize that there's many people who don't actually have any experience, including the terrible education system we have with what is fascism, where does it go, a lot of illusions about it actually, and how deep those illusions actually are even into sections of the intellectuals who seem to forget, they just think it's just right away it's the jackboots and the ovens. I mean, that oven solution for the Jewish people was not part of the program for a very long time. There were people who wanted to do that, but mainly that wasn't their direction. But necessity, see, people have a view of reality that, well, it's just not true, that the people who rule society, they have all freedom. They just can do whatever they want. They sit around a table and figure out, how are we going to screw the people today and the animals, okay? How are we going to screw everybody? That's not what happens. There is imperatives of their system. It's an expand or die system. It's compete or be vanquished on a world scale. They have tremendous necessity. They have to, how do they actually provide? They have no way to bring these jobs back, and they have no way to provide any kind of meaningful life for the masses of Black and Latino youth. So they have to do things. I don't think Obama wanted to do that much different, but even if he did, there's a tremendous necessity they face in the question of immigration. It's not like, that's why we need a revolution. You see, they can't actually solve the problems they face. They can't solve the oppression of Black and Latino people. They can't solve the problem of the environment. Please, please use a good light bulb, okay? But I just got to tell you, that ain't gonna fucking end global warming, okay? That's gonna, and even going vegan isn't gonna save it. It's gonna take I'm sorry. That's no less silly than the other as a way to solve the problem of the environment. It's part of the solution. It's part of the solution. Industrial agriculture, the amount of destruction of the environment. Look, we can have a discussion about this, the amount of destruction of the environment due to the meat production in the world, but the fact is that it's a competitive system over the competition, over the exploitation of labor. You need to actually change the system itself. So where were we? We were talking about the big change, just speaking to the brother, that this election portends, and we did want to put out a statement that lots of other people could take up and take out, that we think accurately reflects the reality that we're facing. Okay? That's what that's about. Right alongside of it on the website, there was a pamphlet, and it's still there. It says how we can win an actual revolution. Right beneath that is an ad for a book called The New Communism by Bob Avakian, which I couldn't commend enough, and people can go online and watch the program that Brother Carl and I did together with Cornel West about this book. So yes, we are not backing off, as I said before, building a movement for an actual revolution. We have a national tour going around the country organizing thousands of people into the movement for an actual revolution. But if you're serious about revolution, you better be serious about fighting this, okay? So that's the difference between those two statements, okay? Not some, reading the tea leaves of a movement or something. It's actually confronting the great need that's in front of us right now. So let me just speak about that, and then I'll just hit this, or not hit, but want to speak to this point the sister made about the Electoral College, this legacy of slavery that we have. Well, it's technically true that, actually, to be honest, I haven't read up as much about this as I did in the year 2000. I think it's technically true that they can change their votes. I'm not sure about that, whether everyone can change it or whether they're committed. On the first ballot, I know. Definitely on the second or third, they can change it. I don't, the actual deal on this, but here's my point on it. They're not going to do it without massive, massive, massive struggle, and where somebody feels that the very republic itself is in peril, that for them to actually go against that. And that's the dominant thing to understand. You're not going to persuade these people to give up power. Okay? You're going to have to fight for it. There's no other way. And so that's a point I want to make. You actually, Carl, let Carl speak on this. He knows more about it.
Yeah, I want to speak on this and a couple of other points.
You want to come up?
I could. Okay, because I actually did read up on the Electoral College thing. But the main point is we need a determined movement of resistance that is refusing to accept a fascist America. Because if you ain't got that, you ain't gonna get nothing. Okay, now looking at this Electoral College thing, 24 states have legislation that binds their electors to vote for who they're supposed to. But the penalty for violating it is it's very seldom violated, and the penalties haven't been all that serious, But really, to look at it like if we can just get the electors to agree not to vote for Trump, that'll take care of this. Because, look, these electors are not representatives of the people. They are put forward by different sets of them, by the two different campaigns, but that's who put them forward. And to think that they're going to just change their mind is really not in the cards. The question has to be building the kind of resistance that makes it untenable for them to go forward with this, that raises a huge political price for them as for whether this happens or not. So it does actually take a movement that is determined to drive this regime out. And there's the option of trying to drive it out before it gets in, or driving it out after it gets in, if it gets in. But that has to be what we aim for, because for humanity, we need to refuse to accept this. I see that you have your hand up. I want to touch on some other things, and then we can come back. Because the point about, was this a fair election? It kind of comes down to, well, what are these elections about anyway? And they are not the way in which the will of the people, gets brought to light and exercised. It's the way in which the rulers of this country limit and shape what are the questions to be gone into and which questions aren't going to be gone into. And then there's a question of an audition from representatives of the ruling class for who are the people best suited to carry out the program that the empire needs to move forward. That's what these elections are about. And then you see things like who gets to vote in the primaries and who doesn't. Also, who gets to vote in the fucking elections overall. Because one big development in the elections this time was disenfranchising large numbers of people, whether that's through new legislation about the kind of ID that you need and how if you've got a card from the NRA, that's good enough to vote. But if you're a student with an ID from your college, that's not a legitimate identification. which all comes down to, oh, you're likely to not vote for the people that we want you to vote for. That's why in the states that were dominated by Republicans, those kinds of decisions about identification were made. So looking at the elections like it's supposed to be a fair process actually misses what's actually going on there and what it needs to come down to. So those were the two things that I wanted to take up. And look, in building this resistance, it really does have to be a broad and determined movement with all kinds of different forces really throwing in. That is why the statement changed, because it was a statement that all kinds of people should and can and have to take up, because we need everybody out there fighting this and taking it on. This is very important. We actually need to look at the breakdown in society and this point about too damn many white people went with Trump. Well, we've got to change that breakdown in society. We got to bring forward everybody, and we especially got to bring forward a lot more white people to do this. And that's going to be very important to have a real shot at stopping this regime, driving it out. And frankly, it's also very important in relation to the question of revolution, because look, the people on top of this society know who are the people who really don't like the way things go. They know who they really have to clamp down on. And we've seen that through mass incarceration, police terror, who gets targeted around that, who gets criminalized, who gets demonized. And going forward, if we allow them to isolate and encircle and clamp down on those forces that are the crucial part of a base for making revolution, then you can't make revolution. You know, we need a situation where people in the suburbs, people in the farther out suburbs, the things they call exurbs, and people in the rural areas for that matter, are being won away from thinking that this Trump program represents something that's in their interest and seeing what side they need to stand with. You know, and that's something that has to be worked on through the course of this. That's a challenge that has to be taken up right now, not something that can wait for later, something that has to be taken up right now. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to, hold on one second. It's hard with the camera in the way I can't see the person I'm talking to, but the sister also in the back. Look, the elections are rigged, just not in the way that Donald Trump was saying. This is people are being played. That's what Carl was just speaking to. And the irony, of course, here is that a lot of the big way that they're played is what we were talking about before, that the whole framework of it is to where you have no initiative to, nobody, you know, you didn't get to vote on global warming in this election in any kind of fundamental way. I mean, you know, it's true that Trump will rip up Paris, but Paris was no fucking solution. Paris, I'm speaking here of the climate accord for those who aren't in on the lingo of all this, but in other words, there was no ability to actually, on the ballot was not, the police shall no longer shoot any black and Latino people and shall treat everybody with respect, and we're going to empty the prisons of all these people who are in there on the basis of the war on the people that they like to call on the war on the drugs. You didn't get to vote on any of this. These candidates were pre-selected, but then in the midst of that, you saw all kinds of that stuff that Carl was talking about, all the ways these electoral things have been set up, including the way the districts have been gerrymandered, but also the Comey thing. I mean, look, this was very sharp. This should tell you something about what time it is. Because you actually had the intervention of the nation's police force in the elections here with the attempt of swaying it towards a fascist regime. And then to come out the next day and say, I accept this, and we should wish him well, this tells you everything you need to really know about the point I was making before, which, you know, that fascism is a matter of taste to the ruling class, but not to the masses, because this means, in other words, look, the people who people turn to, including Bernie Sanders, are more willing to let the masses go through hell than they are to actually call the masses of people out to fight against this. If you have any principles, now is not the time to, oh, well, I got to get in there. I could work from the inside, and we could get to the, ooh, let's have a big discussion over who's going to head up the damn DNC. Come on. This is not the terms of things. We as revolutionaries are going to argue with people about that. At the same time, we actually do have to build this broad unity here. Now, there was a question raised about Putin and Trump's ties with Putin and the revelations of the, you know, through WikiLeaks of the Democratic Party's machinations and all of this, and Brother brought out some important exposure that people may not know about from the Clintons' role in former Yugoslavia. Here's what I want to say about that. Good point. And let's have a, you know, I'm going to maybe put Raymond Lotta on the spot. He's sitting a few rows behind you. Let's have a discussion about this in some depth here. Because I would contend, and I don't want to actually take the time to get into it right now, that there actually is a coherence to the Trump foreign policy, which is very different than both the neocons and the Clinton administration. And it gets very concentrated. You'll see this somewhat in the selection of particularly the Secretary of Defense, and this array of different generals on different sides of this, and how they see dealing with what is extremely sharp contradiction for the imperialists. It is a very, very important question, and it's not one that we could even begin to do justice to here tonight, including we'd have to define both a lot of terms and also run through a lot of history. But I do want to say to those who don't know about this history, time's up. Time's up. You now have to learn this stuff. I want to say this especially to younger generation. It's not been, you know, just from my own story, I can remember, like, you know, not liking war and not liking this, not liking that, and then all of a sudden you actually have to make a decision about, you know, you're approaching draft age in the late 60s, and you've got to actually know some things to decide. You know, what Carl did was heroic, but there was a lot that went into that decision. You know, if you were a serious person, you investigated seriously, and you started learning about the history of America. I remember thinking that people on the left exaggerated how bad America was. That's what I thought. I thought they did wrong things, but I didn't think they were really all those things. I remember somebody saying that they violated every treaty with the Native Americans. I'm going, yeah, every treaty? But, yeah, every treaty. That's the truth, okay?
That's the truth, Ruth.
Somebody else said, you know, every year of the U.S. history, they've either invaded or staged a coup, clandestine or otherwise, someplace in the world. Every year? Go do the work, man. You know, every year. That's the reality. Okay? You have to face up to it. You have to do some work. Okay? And now a lot of work has been done for you here at Revolution Books in two senses. One, we've accumulated an incredible selection of books, of history, as well as novels. I mean, you can learn a lot from a novel. I'm reading Underground right now, and yes, it's a fantasy by Colson Whitehead. In other words, the actual things he's talking about didn't exist, but he's actually talking about, he does this thing to, I mean, it wasn't literally a train running underground. But there was an underground railroad. And this tells the story and brings out the brutal reality to this. So one thing we've done for you, we've assembled some books and some people who are knowledgeable about this. Two, we have a revolutionary theory here, a framework in which to look at and understand what is the source of these problems and what is the solution. And we can connect you up with organizations who are fighting the power today and transforming the people for revolution, as well as connecting people who have other objectives that are part of the way there, and we need to do more of that right now. In terms of, there was another question, and then I want to open it up again, of are we going, and some people know that the Revolutionary Communist Party was involved in an organization that still exists, World Can't Wait, and at one point it was called World Can't Wait to drive out the Bush regime. The answer to that is we are right now spreading this statement, and we want to talk to a lot of people and see what we don't know exactly how we're going to do this, but one of the things we want to do is spread this statement, and as I said before, have these 65 days of discussions and programming at the store. We want to talk with all of you. We want to have teach-ins in a lot of schools, and we'll see what forms of organization are applicable to today's situation. But there certainly does need to be a lot of broad protest in the street, and as well as in the arts, where there's a culture of resistance to this, and some of us led some very important artistic endeavors in the early 2000s as well as in decades before that. That experience needs to come together with a new generation of artists, people in theater, music, fine art, visual arts, and as well as literature. So exactly what shaped this, what we're doing different, to put it this way, is an application of what Bob Avakian has called enrich what is to be done. So we're putting the problem out in front of you and saying, help us solve this, okay? Help us solve this problem of how we put a stop to this fascist agenda. What are your ideas? How can we work together on this? It's a little different in that sense of we're not just going forming in something and say, get into our thing on this. We're saying, let's work together on figuring out the way forward. We have a basic approach to this that's here, and we also have a basic approach to building a movement for an actual revolution. But the sister with the black and white shirt had her hand up before with the earrings. And no, I'm not gonna call on people twice, but I'm gonna invite people, because we're gonna not go much longer, maybe another 20 minutes together, because there's a lot of people here, and I'm positive people have a lot of ideas, and like watching heads go up and down, shake, well, some are going up and down, some are going no. So whichever, but we have some things to talk about, and I think we could do that well if we broke into, people hung out and we got into some questions. This is deep stuff, but I did want to take some new questions. So actually, this is convenient. 1, 2, 3. The sister here, do you still have your hand up? Yeah. Then the brother sitting next to you, then we'll go back to Dred Scott.
Do I have to use the microphone?
Yes, you do.
Okay, I'm just wondering what people's reactions may have looked like if Clinton would have won, and if the same level of urgency would be here if things turned out a different way.
What do you think?
No. So, and okay. I'm just wondering,
Why?
I wonder how Revolution books would have reacted to that, because I know that you guys don't support either candidate.
Well, we wouldn't have had a victory party, but no. It's a serious question. I want to get back to that. Let's get the other two questions, then we'll come back to it.
So my primary question was, first off, if you wanted to comment about how the difference in fascism and populism might be a very valid lens to look at how the Rust Belt switched the way it did, because you alluded previous to the fact of manufacturing jobs and getting rid of NAFTA, and there's a whole series of questions go along with that. My second question is, I've been thinking about a lot of this lately, and one of the thoughts that I've had is that the census is coming up, and the districts are going to be redistricted in, 2016, 4 years, right, or 2 years, something like that. And one of the things that we need to do is address the local governments at all this level, which means that while we have to build this unified front, we have to do it on a national level, and we kind of have to start yesterday. What's the opinion on that form of revolution, as in revolution through legislative change, as opposed to more of a Bolshevikian revolution?
Okay, that's a new term.
I want to sort of return slightly to this question of driving out the regime. And if you feel you've already covered it, then say fine. But I think that there is a transition going on right now, and a different section of the ruling class is sort of coming to power. And I think in that transition, there is both necessity but the possibility of actually doing something to further stop the consolidation of fascism. And so I'm wrestling with, as there's all these demonstrations that are really wonderful, but it's as embryonic as they are, and as you guys have said, they need to be more powerful. How do we, for the people that really don't like this, how can we begin to conceive of a way to, A, make as powerful a statement as possible, and by statement I don't mean written statement, but I mean have hundreds of thousands or millions or whatever can get to say, no, we are not accepting this, and we are going to, in a certain sense, if possible, stop him from actually getting to power, and that would be part of laying the basis for whatever fight happens after that if he is installed. But I think that the thing is, there is this moment where, as I think Carl was really putting out, there are all these profound changes that are going to happen. Some can happen at the stroke of a pen because they're executive orders that can be overturned, and others are going to involve people going along with making some broader changes. But then there are all these people that are in the streets and they're fighting, and that's a very, very, very good thing. Some of them know what fascism is, some of them don't. Some of them, want Hillary, some of them aren't going for that. But there is this, I think, movement that is, that Obama and Clinton and the Dems and others are really trying to say, look, and Dave Chappelle saying, hey, look, let's just wait this out, see what Trump does, peaceful transition to fascism. And I think we can't have any transition to fascism, peaceful or otherwise. And I think that there is sort of, I'm just sort of wrestling with what would it, I mean, there's been a call to go and have protest at the inauguration. Yeah. What would it be if it wasn't just to have protest to register and check off we're upset, but to actually say, look, if you want to install this motherfucker, you're going to have to bring tanks out into the streets. You're going to have to make it clear that this is a dictatorship. People are actually going to do whatever we can to stop that. And so what do you, and I think it's embryonic. I don't know whether people would be down for that. I have not done the investigation, and it's a big question, but I do think how to, beyond this statement, which has been, that RCP put out, which is wonderful. It is a very, very, very good statement and needs to be out everywhere, and it should be in newspapers, and we should get it published. But in terms of also helping to give shape to this upheaval that exists, what do you think about sort of the next 65 days?
Well, I mean, I'll say one thing on that idea of the 65 days. I will. Really? Okay. But it actually came the day after from Sean King, who's a columnist for the Daily News and a figure on the internet, who said, make the next 70 days days of struggle, don't wait. That's where the idea came from. But listen, I wanted people to think a little bit in a more living way. I'm not making a criticism of what any of you said, but I'm saying things, it's, all right, some people here know The Clash were my favorite band. They had an album, but they had a little symbol that said, "The future is unwritten." You see, there's a real struggle going on from many different social forces in society. People should be in the streets. If we say we want X returned by Christmas and this happening on that day, what we can say is what's said here. Don't stop. See, there's a certain sense right now in which a section of the ruling class is saying, you better let this play out. Donald put out the next day what he thought of these protests, and then somebody arraigned him and said, don't say that right yet. But now Giuliani's out there to say, motherfuckers, when I was mayor, nobody took the streets.
You said my streets.
My streets. And unfortunately, he's right in the main. People were
500 people at a protest I was at that we never had a problem.
Yeah, brother, say people were arrested in very large numbers. He and Trump both, as he as a surrogate for Trump, ran on, we're going to start stop and frisk again on a national level. In other words, they're going to do some things. It's interesting, Giuliani sort of forgot the party line on this protesting thing because he was going on and on about this because he so lives inside his own ego. But at a certain point he remembered, oh, I actually think the problem is it's professional protesters paid for by Hillary. Now, this is, see, here, if you know something about fascism, you're paying attention here. This, if you watch Fox TV, this is all that goes on, that Obama and Hillary now have to call the protesters off. It's not enough that they called for unity. And see, this is how they go at this stuff. On the one hand, they're pushing on their rivals, making them not only lead other people back into the fold, but at the threat of what could be unleashed against them, at the same time that they're sending a warning to the protesters themselves about what's going to happen, and they're giving a green light to the police all around the country and extra the fascist mobs to come in on this. This is what, it's going to be a ferocious fight. I do think it should be the kind of thing where every person is going to have to be thinking about, where is this going? I'm sorry, that's going to be, we're either going to go along with this peacefully. You know, there was a saying, or, you know, just a personal story. I was out on September 12th, 2001, right? And I ran into a guy who was a civil libertarian, and he said, Andy, you know, I never understood how this happened, how what happened in Germany happened. He said, now I get it. You see, and we're seeing that play out now. You're seeing people go along with this. Let's give it a chance, hoping they can correct this through the normal channels. Can't we just, I'm not criticizing, well, I am criticizing the program. We're not going to persuade the Electoral College not to do its job. I'm sorry. You're not going to do it. That's another illusion. We're going to vote. You know, Bernie Sanders was screwed in this election. They didn't let him run. I don't think he was an answer for sure. But these people are ruthless in their pursuit of their objectives. People better understand that, okay? And we've got to get real here. Should there be a governing crisis in the country, you're talking tanks in the streets and all that, then I don't know what will happen with the Electoral College. And there's all different kinds of times when different things happen by edict, largely in a reactionary direction, overwhelmingly so. Take the examples of history. At that moment, when the people who rule this society feel very threatened, they don't generally move and say, yeah, gosh, oh, so many people are upset. Why don't we let them run things for a while? That's not what they do. They come down with a look at the Democratic Convention in '68. They don't behave that way. This is probably the most vindictive ruling class in history. I mean, I was just watching a documentary about Juan Carlos, and Tommy Smith, and the whole lives they wouldn't forgive these guys until really right now as they're approaching the end of their lives. Okay, so I just wanted to make this.
You might want to tell people who.
Oh, okay,
John Carlos and Tommy Smith were.
You tell them then.
John Carlos, well, actually, Tommy Smith and John Carlos were the two sprinters who won medals in the 1968 Olympics as part of the U.S. Olympic team, and then got up on the platform to get their medals and gave the Black Power salute when the U.S. national anthem was played to make a dramatic statement about the oppression of black people. And Tommy Smith was the guy who won the gold medal, and I believe he set records at a number of sprinting distances. And usually, that makes you the fastest man in the world, and you get all these contracts promoting these different things. But because of that stand that he took, no contracts, and he disappeared from the sport of track for a while, and it was a while before he was able to come back, and not as a runner, but as a coach. John Carlos, in addition to being, well, he was actually the third fastest man, because a guy from Australia, I believe, finished second, who supported their protests, by the way. He was also a very good football player. And you figure you could have gotten a guy on your team who would have been the fastest guy on the field. No NFL team wanted to touch him. This is what they did to these guys, and this was big. This was huge.
Yeah, look, it's an important example there in terms of right now this struggle is being fought out a lot around Colin Kaepernick and high school teams, some of whom in Texas have been suspended. Their coaches have been fired. Their football season canceled because they're taking a knee. And other schools where this is... These things now enter into the larger political struggle. And everything has to be fanned right now. Nothing, yes, it's extremely important to be in the streets, but we have to, every act of resistance needs to be doubled and redoubled. It does have to become a thing where they feel they can't go forward with this, and we have to strengthen the forces of resistance. We need a culture of resistance against the revolting culture, and we need a revolutionary culture and a revolutionary movement that is aiming to seize power. But there's an important point that I don't want to gloss over. There's a documentary that Brian Gumbel just did on his Real Sports show about the Australian guy whose name I forget. Norman.
Norman was his last name.
Norman was his last
Peter
name.
Norman.
Who stood with the brothers and put on this badge, and his entire life was ruined in Australia. And I just want to say that there were a lot of white youth and young people, as well as people middle-aged and older, out in the streets as well. And there's a tremendous potential for people to unite now against what's going on. And that is very important, and not to take the view that this can't be transformed. And Carl made a point before, how we went over even this other section of whites out there has to do with, one, the more ferocious our struggle is, the more it's going to wake people up. I just have to say that's how you that's the main way you crack people away from us, including not backing down when they come and intimidate you. But the other thing is we have to go among people and talk to them and get them the material and reason with them while struggling with them very sharply about that they are on the wrong side of history. So I'm trying to think what other questions do we have.
If Clinton had won.
Clinton had won. If Clinton had won, this is why I started making the point, if you have to have a living... If Clinton had won, she would have won in an election that would have been contested, most likely. He said he wasn't going to accept it. You would have had those mobs out in the street. That would have been very different than this. You had the threat of impeachment. There would be all kinds of things going on, so it would have been a very complex situation. I don't think the spontaneous struggle would have been the same. I don't think that I don't think there'd be demonstrations of unfortunately, of the progressive youth and people against her spontaneously, because people have largely been locked within the framework of Bernie or Jill, or do nothing, or complain, or get involved in local struggles. I think this is where the movements are at right now. So I don't think the progressive movement probably would have been in the streets right away. I think the Trump people would have been in the streets, and that would have presented a necessity. Look, I gotta just say, on a shameful fucking point here, and also a heroic point, I have to say, the revolution clubs around this country prepared to go to Cleveland. And we prepared to be working among 10,000 protesters, which is what everybody said was going to happen. At the I'm sorry, did I misspeak? The Republican convention in Cleveland. Nobody came but those protesters, or virtually nobody. There was another 100 people there at different points. It's very small rallies. This is the conciliation, capitulation, and confusion on the part of the progressive strata, as well as the active work, in my opinion, although I'd like to understand it better, of the Democratic Party. And those of you who are part of organizations that plan to go to Cleveland, please come and honestly say, why did your organization not go there? Why did Eric Dyson put out a ferocious column, we all have to go there and get arrested, and then not even show up at the conference he called himself? I can't believe this didn't happen because the Democrats decided, let's not make waves here, because we got this thing in the bag by doing our thing over here. So I do want to say, just in relationship to what would have happened if she had won, there would be have to be a lot of struggle with people to understand what it is that she represents, what the elections represent, and that we actually have to be opposing both sides of this, if you will, pyramid of power of the Republicans and the Democrats. They don't stand in our interest, and their system is not set up for it. In terms of working on local levels in electoral redistricting.
Redistricting.
Yeah, redistricting. People are going to do such things. And I think, you know, they're going to do things. They're going to try this. I think, speaking as a revolutionary and someone who has an analysis that the system is the problem, I would say to you, that's not going to change things. You need to get into the revolution. Can we find some ways to struggle about that, talk about it, work together? Yes, we can, and we should. And if you succeed, you know, I mean, it's the same way I feel about, or Bakin has written an essay out of Doctors Without Borders, you know. Fine, you're helping people, and that's honorable. But the problem is, the system is going on and on and on and crushing people. I don't think you're going to do it that way. You see, you actually have to make an analysis. Does what you're trying to do correspond to where U.S. imperialism is headed and the contradictions it faces? There's a way in which a lot of people on the left say, well, we should just do what the right does. We should organize as good as they do. We need our own Fox TV. And you sort of got it with MSNBC, but it's a shadow of Fox. Why? Because the direction of U.S. imperialism is not on your side. It needs to go in a different way right now, okay? And so they have a lot of wind behind their back. You don't have any wind. Right now you got a gale in your face, or a hurricane in your face, you know. And that's the thing that people have to wake up to. Okay, so look, these are some big questions. It is 6:15. We said we would go from 4 to 6, and I'm just very anxious for people to have a chance to talk to each other. If you haven't signed up on the Revolution Books email list, please do so. We are going to make this a much more active list. If you would like to have a discussion group at the store, please, could Raymond, where's Raymond, could you stand up? See Raymond Latta, see Jane, Brenda's in back there. Let's have a lot of discussions. If you know a professor or a writer or an actor or an artist who you think would want to come either have a discussion here or even do a performance. There's a lot of people who have some powerful art. Let us know. Let's get this. Let's fill out this schedule, okay? And see this as a center for not just to be some self-contained thing here, but to then be going out in the world, as I said, teach-ins and all kinds of things. And last, for those who haven't actually gotten into and are sitting here saying, well, boy, I know that you come here and Andy Z and Carl are going to talk about the communism and what did you call it? Bolshevikianism? Okay, so for those who don't know what he's referring to, is the Bolsheviks were the party that Lenin led and led the Russian Revolution, which accomplished amazing things, you know, in the Soviet Union, and then encountered difficulties, and eventually that struggle was reversed, and the Soviet Union became a state capitalist country for many years, and then since disbanded. And the same process went on in China, even as nominally the state capitalists are still very much in power. So these are things we can talk about. But I will say this: the new book by Bob Avakian is titled The New Communism, and for good reason, and we spent a lot of time coming up with the title, because there's been a qualitative breakthrough in the science of communism that Avakian has made. This is not just because, oh, he's our guy, so we're going to promote him. What a great guy. He is a great guy, but that's not the point. The point is that communism is what the world actually needs. And we can talk about this afterwards and we can make the case for that, and we can argue about it. But there have been, well, it's accomplished amazing things in the 20th century. There have been shortcomings in how in the science of revolution itself, in the methodology that were tended towards being unscientific, tended towards being religious, that communism would be inevitable, that the proletariat, by virtue of its birth, possessed the truth. There are things that he has broken through on and developed a new understanding. If you read this Constitution, and it's radically different than anything that existed in the previous socialist societies. It doesn't mean we have to reject all that experience and condemn what happened before. That would be very wrong to do. People fought, and it was the first time the slaves had risen up in the world to try and end all oppression. But it's not sufficient to go forward. This is. Now, obviously, that's something I'm contending to you, saying that I think it can, but read it. We're having study classes on this. We're having just informal discussions on it. At a time like this is more needed than ever, this and that Constitution. But we are envisioning a process where we're standing shoulder to shoulder fighting against this fascist offensive and presidency, and at the same time, for all those who've said, well, I don't really want to get into this, this is a time to get into it and disagree if you're going to disagree. That's part of how we get to the truth, actually, by struggling over this and understanding things more deeply. So look, with that, I want to close the program. I want to ask you to get stacks of these to take out, and suggestions you have for how to go at this, who to talk to, critiques, all of that. We really sincerely want to hear that. So I really am very heartened by the number of people who've come out in the streets, and I'm very heartened by the number of people who are here tonight, and in every forum this discussion has to, it's on, we're in it. There's no, I did try to wake up and say this didn't really happen. I tried that for a couple days, it's not going to work, and so there it is. Cast away illusions, as we said in the 60s, and prepare for some momentous struggle that could actually result in something far better. And that's a whole other discussion as to why that might be possible out of this situation. You can look at the pamphlet, How We Can Win, and that indicates some of that. So thank you very much for coming out. Oh, wait. The sister wants to make an announcement. One announcement, relatively brief.
Hello?
But stand over here.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I'm Voidy with the Revolution Club, and there are revolution clubs all over this country that have been fighting day in and day out, especially after this election. In fact, in Chicago, they've gone out to the burbs over there and going head up against these fascists who were, after a man had been murdered in a funeral procession. They sat around and called his family, they called him the N-word. They threw things at them. These were all at the same time, they were chanting, Trump, Trump, Trump. And then the election comes. And the whole, that whole force is legitimized on a whole new level. And the clubs have been out there in that part, uniting with all of the youth that are actually standing up against this. Because there is a big problem that a large number of white people did vote for Trump. But there are a lot of people who aren't, as stuck in those ways and actually fighting against this, who need to be united with. And you need to join the club today, not only as a part of actually transforming and being able to lead the people who are out there struggling against this so that we can get to a better world, but to join a force that's not afraid to go up against this system and actually, take this head on. So come on down, get a pamphlet for joining the revolution from one of the club members. They've got the RNL t-shirts on, and actually get with, a club that's going out there and fighting, actually knowing a solution and getting there.